I got my,
Oh, nice.
wore my UT Tower socks yesterday.
Good morning, everyone. I hope you had a great night in Austin last night. We had an amazing day one yesterday, or at least I think so. My team think it went pretty well. And we hope you all had a great time learning new things and meeting people. We are so excited to kick off day two with these special guests. You may have heard of them. Two guys on your head from NPR. And we have Dr. Art Markham and Dr. Bob Duke. And I'm not going to delay them anymore because they are amazing and hilarious, and we can't wait to hear from them today. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Lisa. Thank you. Good morning.
Morning.
It's so nice to be here to get to talk with you today, and I'm sure you've been welcome to Austin already a lot, but welcome to Austin. I hope your first day was successful and productive, and I hope today will be the same. You probably know from looking at the program and from what you've been talking about so far that one of the things that we're going to be talking about today is well-being for everyone, but especially you as caregivers. And I think often, when we think about having the responsibility of caring for others, whether it's our children or aging parents or other loved ones or friends or whatever, it's easy to focus on the responsibilities that we have and to focus on the things that we need to do to take care of the people we're charged with caring for. And I think what gets lost in that, and one of the organizers was just telling us that this was an important session yesterday, is in order to do that successfully, we need to take care of ourselves. If we're not healthy, in every sense of the word healthy, it's unlikely that we're going to be able to effectively help other people who are in need. So that's kind of the outline of what we're going to be doing today.
Yeah, and I want to start by picking up on the word responsibility that Bob was using. And the idea behind a responsibility is that a responsibility puts you motivationally in what we would call an avoidance mode. And the reason it puts you in an avoidance mode is because when you have a responsibility, what it says is, if I don't do this thing, something terrible is going to happen, right? And that's when you say I have a responsibility, that's what you mean. As opposed to, I have this ideal I'd like to achieve, right? Which focuses you on the beautiful, wonderful, desirable things in the world. If I have some ideal that I'm trying to go after, then if I don't act, I just don't get the ideal thing, but the world doesn't fall apart. But if I have a responsibility, if I don't act, something bad happens. And the reason that matters is because that is one of the bigger sources of stress in people's lives. When you are in a mode in which you believe that if there's something you don't do, a terrible thing's going to happen, then your motivational system gets in this mode of looking for crisis, looking for threat, and the way that motivational system communicates with the rest of your brain is it creates these emotions, and the emotion that's associated with a threat that you haven't yet avoided is stress or fear or anxiety, but that axis of things. And so when you focus on your responsibilities primarily as the motivator for your life, you are putting yourself in a situation in which the emotions you're most likely to experience are fear, anxiety, and stress. And then when you successfully avoid a threat, then in that moment you experience some relief, And stress and relief are, stress is kind of painful and relief is pleasant. Yeah, but it's not joy, right? It's not joy and happiness and satisfaction. And most people, when they walk up to you, they might say, so how are you feeling? You want to be able to say happy, not relieved. So the question is, how do we go from a work experience in which we're likely to characterize things in terms of threat and avoidance of threat? How do we actually bring more joy and happiness and satisfaction into our lives and minimize the downside of all of that stress and anxiety.
And one of the most interesting things about the way Art just described that is how the very same circumstances and the very same behavior on the part of a caregiver can be defined in very different ways. Art was mentioning the idea of avoidance being sort of a frame of mind, and approach being a different frame of mind. And when you have goals that you approach and you achieve the goals, there's a sense of satisfaction, there's a sense of joy. When you're avoiding calamity, however you define that, and you successfully avoid the calamity, as Art was saying, you feel relief, but relief is really not that positive an emotion. It's just the fact that something terrible didn't happen. And we work with a lot of students here on this campus, and we see a lot of stressors in people, and not just about school and those kinds of things. I mean, many of our students have family responsibilities. They have financial challenges. I mean, there are a lot of stressors in there. And I just want to say a couple things about stress in general. As we evolved as creatures, stress served a very valuable function, right? It heightened our alertness. It did some physiological things that readied our bodies to escape or fight. It did a lot of things that were very advantageous in the short term. But stress responses, when they're advantageous, operate in the short term, right? I mean, if you're out in the savannah somewhere looking for food and a large animal comes rushing at you and you escape, or you try to escape and you run, the stress doesn't last very long. Either you escape and the stress ends, or you don't escape and the stress ends. But the reason that's an important thing to think about is what our bodies aren't prepared to do is deal with sustained stress. And one of the advantages of being a human being, which is also a disadvantage, is we can time travel in our minds. We can visit the past, we can imagine the future, and in those imaginings, we can actually create feelings of all different kinds of things. Feelings of joy, feelings of happiness, feelings of expectation, feelings of regret, and feelings of stress. And what that unfortunately leads many people to do is to have a level of stress that is sustained over a long period of time, which does very unhealthy things to the body. Because now, our bodies are having to maintain this response that really wasn't meant to be sustained, and all kinds of things happen to our cardiopulmonary system and to our nervous system, and all kinds of things that now have lasting deleterious effects on the body. And one of the things that Art and I talk about a lot is that our brains and the emotions that our brain generates are part of our physical body. Lots of times people think about the brain as some sort of separate thing, and our minds are sort of even separate from that. And our bodies are just the thing that carries that stuff around. But actually, our minds and our bodies are of a piece. And the things that affect what we imagine as our physical body are affecting the part of our physical body that is our brain. And one of the things that we try to encourage people to do, the young people who we work with a lot, is taking care of their physical selves. I mean, which means eating healthy foods, exercising, staying active, having relationships with other human beings that are positive, because all of that contributes to all the parts of your body, including your brain, including your emotions, working optimally.
And one of the things about this whole system is it's ultimately designed to act. So all of this, preparation and motivation is really designed to do stuff. And one of the things about the modern world is we don't do a lot. I mean, y'all are sitting in seats right now and watching us. So you're doing something, you're paying attention, but your bodies are pretty sedentary at the moment. And that posture of sitting, that characterizes an awful lot of work these days. You sit there at your computer and you send emails to people, you're talking to a person and you're both sitting. There's a whole lot of sitting going on. And one of the reasons that this matters is because when we start to think about that stress response that comes from characterizing the world as avoidance, Part of the problem is there are lots of situations in which the thing that we are, the calamity that's out there is something we can't do much about. I mean, you all work in, with very difficult cases. You have people who are struggling with real difficulties, and you're working with them, and there's a certain amount you can do, and then there's an awful lot that's out of your control. And yet, there are bad outcomes that can happen as a result of the things that you have no control over. And part of the problem with that is you can spend a lot of time thinking about that. And as Bob was saying, you can project yourself into a future in which things have happened, and you really can't do much about them, but you can be aware of that threat, which can then cause more stress. And I was really struck a few years ago. Bob's heard me tell this story a few times, but he's going to have to hear it again.
I love this story. What are you talking about?
But I was watching the movie Bridge of Spies, and I don't know how many of you have seen that movie, and I'm not going to ruin it for anybody, but the movie involves someone who's been accused of spying, and then Mark Rylance plays this person who's been accused of spying, and Tom Hanks plays the lawyer who's defending him, and as they reach one of the climactic scenes, there's a trial that's going to happen, and the Mark Rylance character is sitting in prison, and Tom Hanks, playing his lawyer, comes in and says, "You don't look worried. I think I'd be worried right now. You don't look worried." And he just looks at him and he says, "Well, would it help?" And I love that line, "Would it help?" Because it actually distills something very fundamental about worry, about focusing on the negatives for the future, which is, if there's something you can do about it, worry. Think through, use that opportunity to what they call ruminate, right? Chew over these thoughts, to think about, what should I do in this future situation? But when there's nothing you can do about it, when it wouldn't help to worry, you should let it go, right? And practice that. Practice that idea of, when there's nothing I can do, I have to just let events move forward, be aware of things that are happening in case something comes up that I can do something about, but I cannot sweat the details of things that I have no control over, because that creates this additional stress that I can't do anything about. I can't escape it. And one of the things that's really important is to begin to develop relationships with other people where you can begin to talk about the things that are worrying you. So having a buddy, for example, in your, who you work with, that you can talk to about the things that you're going through. And one of the things you can do is to try to help each other to distinguish between those situations you can do something about it, where the worry is productive, and those situations in which you can't, in which you have to learn to let that go for your own well-being.
Yeah. And when Art was saying, somebody you talk to about this stuff, I'm sure all of you in here recognize the value of having people in your life, whether they're loved ones or coworkers or friends or whatever, with whom you can communicate about the things that concern you and the things you're happy about and the things you celebrate about. And I think we underestimate how much all of us as human beings have the potential to define or redefine the situations we find ourselves in, to focus more on goals that we want to accomplish, recognizing the things that are under our control and the things that aren't. This isn't to say we're going to ignore the ones that aren't in our control, but to recognize that continuing to ruminate about them is not going to be productive. And I'll give an example with my own personal life with my wife, who I adore and is wonderful and makes my life tremendous. And one of the reasons that she's so good at doing that is she is a very effective manipulator. Now, the happy thing is, if she were sitting up here, she'd say the same thing about me, and I surround myself with highly manipulative people who share my values. Right? Because what they want for me is they understand what I value well enough to point me in a direction that's consistent with what I value. and to pull me away from the things that don't. I feel like I have the greatest job on the planet. I work in this terrific university. I get to spend my days around bright young people. It's just a joy. But there's a price you have to pay for that, the big price, and that is you have to attend committee meetings, which I'm not fond of, but it's a small price to pay for the joy that I get to experience as a college professor. But sometimes when I've been in some lousy committee meeting and I get home and I'm anxious to tell my wife about it. So I say, listen, you wouldn't believe this meeting today. And then I start going on about this, and she'll let me go for about maybe a minute or two. And then she says, well, are you going to chair the committee? Do you want to take over his chair? Well, no. Well, you want to resign? You want to resign? No, I just want to complain about it some more. Now, she knows that, and I know that, and we start talking about something else because she's talking about something else. Now, you might think to yourself, well, wait a minute. I mean, listen, she's an empathetic person. Shouldn't she let you drone on for another 10 minutes about this thing? Well, the answer is no, because what's that going to do except heighten my frustration and my stress about this? So she gently, skillfully, manipulatively moves me somewhere else. And you know, I think that used to be a thing about, you know, driving while intoxicated that said, friends don't let friends drive drunk, you know? I think there should be one called friends don't let friends whine, you know? I mean, a little bit of whining, everybody gets to do a little bit of that. But then, let's talk about something productive to do it. And I'm going to cycle all the way back to the way Art started this about shifting the attention from what you're trying to avoid to what you're trying to accomplish. Because when you're focusing on a goal that you're trying to accomplish and not something you're trying to avoid, the world looks different. Your view of what your capacities are looks different because now you're in an approach mode rather than avoidance mode.
Yeah, and I think, you know, to tie together a few things from this, you know, as Bob was saying earlier, you know, as human beings, we have this remarkable capacity to think about almost everything in many different ways. You know, I was thinking as we got up to sit here up on stage this morning, you know, there are people out there, I hear, who find public speaking to be like the most frightening thing that you can do. In fact, it is such a frightening thing that psychologists who want to study stress routinely use the threat of having to give a public speech as a manipulation of stress. They will tell undergraduates, you have 10 minutes to prepare a speech that you're going to give in front of some experts and you know, on this difficult topic, and you get increases in the stress hormone cortisol after 10 minutes of that because people are petrified of giving public speeches. And you know, I was thinking about that because Bob and I, we relish this, right? The chance to get up in front of a bunch of people is a blast. In part, of course, just as an aside, in case you're one of those people who is afraid of giving speeches, one of the reasons people are afraid of giving public speeches is because they think if the speech goes badly that everyone's going to remember forever what an awful talk they gave. The fact is, life is so busy that if you give a terrible talk, the outcome is no one's going to remember it. So you've got nothing to worry about in giving a talk, because so few of you will remember a couple of things we said. Most of you won't remember any of it at all. And so you know, the downside isn't so bad. But that actually is the point, right? We have this capacity to decide what it is that we're going to choose to focus on, and then to use that to drive what we're doing. And so, you know, after this talk is over, Bob and I will remember the few things that we said that you laughed at, you know, and all of the jokes we tried to give that didn't land, we'll just forget, and that will get us through another day. And now to return to what Bob was saying about really effective, manipulative other people, part of what they do so well is to refocus you on those beautiful, wonderful, desirable aspects of the stuff you're doing. So, you know, the other thing is Bob will whine about those committee meetings, and I don't feel sorry for him because I've now become a university administrator and I create those meetings. So I think they're
Our
incredibly
relationship
important.
has changed.
It changed quite a bit over the years. Sorry, Bob.
Yeah.
I bought a clock with the Death Star on it, just to remind myself that I have gone over to the dark side. But the thing that good manipulative people will do is they will take those events and they will say, but isn't there a great thing that happened? So, after the other thing is if Bob whines to me about a committee meeting, which he also is prone to do, I will also point out some of the cool things that happen as a result of some of those meetings, and he'll be like, yeah, okay, so maybe it was worth it.
Yeah.
And so we're able to kind of decide, well, which element of this is the active ingredient, is the one that we care about, and focus on that. And because the motivational system ultimately has got to make this decision about whether you're in approach mode or avoidance mode, all else being equal, if there isn't a large animal coming at you, it's probably worth trying to find the beautiful, wonderful, desirable things that you could achieve and focusing on them, because you have more opportunity to experience real joy and happiness and satisfaction in the workplace.
Yeah. I just want to say something about how individual people vary in how easy or difficult it is to do what we're talking about. We like to imagine all of us individual human beings as totally malleable. If we just got our mind right, we could do the thing that we want to do if we would just think right about it. But
snap out of it.
Snap out of it, right? And which is why I think our mental health system is so problematic. Because if somebody comes in to an emergency room and they've fallen and they've broken their arm and there's a piece of bone sticking out of their upper arm, no one says, hey, just suck it up, But somehow somebody in a mental crisis where nothing's visible, right? There's nothing physically wrong. It's easy for people.
Overtly physically.
Yeah, right, overtly, thank you. Overtly physically wrong. It's much easier to dismiss that as weakness or a character flaw or whatever, right? And that's a mistake. I mean, we have to acknowledge that the people we interact with, whether we're interacting with them as colleagues or as clients or as patients, they are not the same as we are, and we're not the same as they are. And we all vary in the extent to which we can decide to think about things in different ways. But there are consistencies that contribute to what most people conceive of as well-being. And I've given a lot of talks on well-being over the past couple of years, and I see a lot of definitions that are, to me, overly elaborate and have a lot of words in them and things. So I came up with what for me is a pretty succinct definition of well-being. And so here it is now. Is that more often than not, and on most days, our efforts lead to rewarding outcomes, all in a context of physical health and positive personal relationships. I'll say it again because it's so good, I really love it, right? More often than not, and on most days, our efforts lead to rewarding outcomes, all in a context of physical health and positive personal relationships. Now, the reason I think that's such an important thing to contemplate is that it doesn't say this stuff always goes well, right? It's just more often than not. And every day is not a bowl of cherries, but most days are pretty good. And I think when you look at the individuals who are struggling, the people who are really having difficulty, some of those features in their life experience are absent. That there aren't most days in which they put forth effort and something rewarding comes from that effort. Because it's not just a matter, well-being isn't just a matter of sitting there and basking in nice stuff, right? That gets pretty boring. But when you're expending effort, whether that has to do with personal effort in terms of a relationship, or effort in terms of your work, or effort in terms of your physical self, and something rewarding comes from that on a pretty dependable basis, you have a pretty good sense of the way the world works. All the people who are challenged to feel good about their lives don't experience that. And one of the things that we have the potential to do as caregivers is thinking about how can I structure experiences, small things, where a little bit of effort can lead to a little bit of reward. And that's something that I think all of us have the capacity to do for ourselves. I mean, I know for myself, when I'm kind of down in the dumps, I know the things that I can do in terms of expending effort, that the accomplishment of little things that I get to do now pumps me up a little bit out of that. And I said to a student once who was struggling with addictions, and she was in therapy and was doing very well, and I said, you know, accomplishment is my drug of choice. You know, I have this little thing that I can put forth some effort and get something from it that is emotionally uplifting, right? And the skill for all of us as teachers who are great teachers, and I have to say immodestly, Art and I are great teachers, is that we're able to create experiences for learners where those kind of effort, reward relationships are pretty dependable. Again, not every day, not every time, but most of the time, most days.
And the reason we're talking about all this today is because I want to capture something really important about what Bob was just saying, which is, you know, on most days, most of the time. And what that means is that your well-being, and really this session is focused on your well-being, because you know, in order to be effective as, you know, in caring for other people, you've got to be in a good place yourself. It's really hard to work effectively with the people that you work with if you're really struggling yourself. And the thing is, there's a tendency to say, well, I'll work on myself later when I have time. I'm busy right now and stuff's gonna come. There's things I gotta do. But the problem is there isn't a big dose of resilience that you can just, you know, mainline in order to, you know, to put yourself back on an even keel when things have become rocky, because of exactly what Bob was saying. Well-being is fundamentally the marathon, not the sprint, which means that small doses of accomplishment, small doses of the positive are the thing that keep us resilient. So it's actually the day-to-day engagement with physical activity, the day-to-day engagement with positive relationships with the people around you, the day-to-day engagement with pursuing something that gives you joy and pleasure. Those day-to-day things on a small scale are a crucial part of the resilience that we all need to deal with the inevitable things that are going to go wrong.
Yeah.
And so we can't wait for it. We have to actually do it every day, fundamentally as a part of who we are. And I was reading a paper just the other day that was talking about the importance of social relationships in maintaining positive feeling across your lifespan. One of the most important things you can do is to maintain all of those relationships with the people around you. And you know, the reason you have to do that day to day is because relationships require a little bit of maintenance. They're not just going to be there on the days that you need it, but also because, you know, it is those day-to-day interactions that are the thing. You know, we're fundamentally social creatures, so we have lots of mechanisms in the brain that are fundamentally designed to help us stay connected to everybody else. We need to exercise those daily. And the fact is, and you all know this, on the days when you're feeling really kind of sad or stressed, you tend to want to be alone. And so the problem is, if you only wait until you need the social relationships in order to then get those social relationships, what's going to happen is you're going to get into a motivational state in which you don't want the social relationship, even though it's the thing that's going to help you. So you have to nurture that on a day-to-day basis so that on those days that you don't feel like being with somebody else, those other people are going to be there in your life anyhow, and they're going to help to lift you up.
And I just want to say something just about the number of people in your life. I mean, how many people can there be or should there be? You know, I was talking to one of my students a couple of weeks ago who had posted something on her Facebook page. I'm not on Facebook, but one of my other students told me about this, that really it was a little too personal on it. I don't think she should have done that. And I
You're so like 20th century.
I know. Such a Luddite. Anyway, I said to her, you know, you really probably shouldn't, you know, post that. And she said, well, only my friends could see it. And I said, you don't have 1,200 friends. I know Facebook tells you have 1,200 friends, but you don't have 1,200 friends, right? And so how many friends should you have? And I don't want to talk about number. I want to talk about, instead, what you make a decision about how many people and which people you allow to give you feedback that affects how you feel about yourself. You know, one of the things that I get to do, which is lovely, is help people who are preparing to be teachers to go into schools. And I have a human learning behavior class that I teach the semester before they go out. And I think, how are you going to know from day to day how you're doing? And because you're going to get feedback from everywhere, right? I mean, students are going to be responding to you, other teachers are going to be responding to you, you know, you might see a parent going to be responding to you. Who are you going to let tell you how good you are or not, right? Because I tell you what's going to happen. You know, one day you're going to go in and you're going to teach a little lesson, and some kid is going to walk up to you, just cute as can be, and say, "You're the best teacher in the world." And if you think to yourself, "I am?" Well, what does that kid know? Like, that kid has seen all the teachers in the world and decided, what's that kid responding to? So here's the thing. Don't believe that, right? And you know why you shouldn't believe it? Because once that kid tells you you're the best teacher in the world and you believe it, the next day, when you put that kid in timeout, they're going to call you an asshole. And then, what? Like, was a kid, what does he know? Well, yesterday, he was very astute, you know? And today, now he doesn't know anything. So the question is, who do you allow in? Who do you allow to say, how am I doing today? And what I want to suggest to you is that one group that it shouldn't be are the people we're charged with helping. Not to say that we can't take pleasure in the fact that we help somebody and they're grateful to us for doing that. I'm not saying that. We should take pleasure in that. But when saying, oh, you know, am I doing a good job or not, there's a small number of people in our lives, potentially, who meet two criteria. They honest to God know what they're talking about, and they care about us. If they don't meet both of those criteria, they don't get to come in, right? Not in that regard. You know, I mean, my mother, who lived to the ripe old age of 90, who just loves me more than anything, and the feeling was reciprocated, thought I was the most brilliant person in the whole world. Said she read every paper I ever wrote, she read my book, she did, you know, everything. And she thought it was wonderful. And I was so happy she thought it was wonderful. But she's not the person that I depended on for feedback in that regard. You know, I was happy, but she's my mom, you know, and she loves it because she's my mom, not because it's good, right? And there are other people who really know a lot, but they don't care about me. So why would I give them so much credence in giving me feedback on what I'm doing, right? But there are a few people who meet both of those criteria. And they're the people that I go to for dependable feedback about how I'm doing. So I'm not just responding to the vicissitudes of whoever I bump into today who tells me I'm brilliant or I'm an idiot or I'm really good or I suck. I'm not doing that, right? Because that stuff's going to happen. And if I'm responding to every one of those things as if I should take them credibly, then I'm going to be going like this emotionally, and this little curve here is a picture of mental ill health. And I want my curve to be pretty flat and generally trending up, right? And I do that by making deliberate choices about who gets to come in, right? And who gets to give me feedback about how I'm doing.
All right, so we want to leave a little time for Q&A, so this would be that time. On our radio show, we don't take call-ins, but when we are here. We do sort of take the virtual version of call-ins. There are a couple of microphones up front, so this is your chance.
Yeah,
you know.
we'd be happy to answer whatever questions you might have that we haven't answered. I see a mic there. I don't know if there's another one or not. Oh, there's one over there too. Yeah. Okay.
We're
great.
willing to answer any questions.
Yeah. Right.
Happy depends on the question.
Yeah.
No, that's not true. We're going to focus on the positive elements.
Yeah.
Right now, we're doing what's called vamping while we're waiting for somebody to walk up here. There we go. I see movement.
Yes, sir.
Awesome. So good morning. First thing, incredibly impressed with what you mentioned here because it has a lot of, me especially, but a lot of us thinking about really intentionality. One thing that sticks out that's very unique to military culture is we're in a culture of performing, getting things done. In fact, every one of us who has bars or birds' leaves on our chest, we're evaluated based off of how we performed in the last 365. But what you mentioned is it's about not what we do, but how we be. And I think it's challenging because we live in a world where we convince ourselves that as soon as we check that box down the road, then we'll be happy. But I think that's one of the biggest lies we've been sold. So my question for you is that we know our mind is designed to think about the future and the past, but what you're mentioning is setting intention for how do I be today. Mm-hmm. So how do you, on a daily basis, set your intention to be the type of person you want to be so you can have a meaningful, life and not get caught in that trap?
That's such a great question, and thank you. By the way, I realized I was looking around the room waiting for somebody to walk to the front, and then half the people are wearing camouflage, so would I be able to see them? I was reminded, actually, when I was 15 years old, Bob's heard me tell this story too. When I was 15 years old, I hiked the Grand Canyon. So we walked all the way down, and then we walked all the way back up. And on the way back up, right, there's all these switchbacks on the trail. And we've been walking for 7 hours, and I'm tired, and I walk up a switchback, and I think, surely the top must be around the next bend. And you make the next bend, and it's just another sandy path upward. And then you walk up that bend, and surely the top must be, and so you keep doing this. And I was reminded of this when I was a graduate student. As an undergraduate, I thought to myself, well, being an undergraduate is kind of stressful, but I'll be really happy when I get into graduate school. And then I got into graduate school, and then I thought, well, as soon as I get my master's degree finished, then I'll be happy. And then, well, as soon as I get my dissertation proposal, as soon as I get a job, as soon as I kept finding the next switchback. And I realized that there was this parallel to being, walking up the Grand Canyon and wanting to get to the top. And, the funny thing was, at the age of 15, the fundamental thing I forgot as I was walking up was I was in the Grand Canyon. It's like one of the major natural wonders of the world, and I'm trying to get to the top. And so that I can walk away from the Grand Canyon. I mean, how many times are you going to get to the Grand Canyon? We are in the Grand Canyon. This is it. It's not going to be the next bend that's going to get you the satisfaction you want. We're in the Grand Canyon right now. And it took me a while, right? But I think it was somewhere after I got my first job, actually, and realized, because then I started thinking, well, when I get tenure, then I'll be happy. It's like, yeah, when I retire, then I'll be happy. So at some point, I actually had this realization, essentially, that I'm in the Grand Canyon. And so I try to spend my time looking around the world, trying to find the sights, and really trying to be mindful, not in a hocus pocus way, but in a real mindful just means bringing things to mind, mindful of cool stuff that happens. Like I'm sitting in front of a whole group of people right now getting to share stuff I know about. How cool is that? Right? Those moments, it's incredibly important to pop yourself back up into the present every once in a while and go, whoa, this is really cool.
Yeah. You know, I just add one thing to that question, because it's an excellent question. And I say this, having this acknowledge, as you probably could guess, I've not been in the military, so I only know that culture from friends of mine who have been in the military. But you know, there's a real effort in lots of hierarchical cultures to incentivize people to behave in ways that are optimal, and however you define that. And those incentives do in fact accomplish that. You know, you get a promotion, you know, you get some kind of decoration, you get a raise, you get tenure, you know, whatever. But one of the things that's problematic about that, even though it's effective often in motivating people to act in ways that you want them to act, is that it focuses attention away from the act itself, right? And I tell you, you know, my office is across the street in the Butler School of Music, and you know, I'm surrounded by colleagues of mine who are great artists. And I have to tell you, none of those people would have become the great artists that they've become just on the basis of what rewards have come to them, given the fact that they've reached such great levels of artistry. Because the rewards are not enough. It takes too much time. Sometimes it's boring. It takes a lot of effort. And the external rewards don't compensate for it. It's not enough. So unless you're in the moment thinking, I love the fact that I'm doing this thing, you're going to be unhappy a lot, because you're going to be going till the next degree, the next phase of your academic career, whatever, and then when it comes, you think, wait a minute, you know, this is supposed to be when happiness ensues. Well, no, there's just like another damn thing you have to go after, right? And the thing about this that's interesting to me most, and Art and I have had this conversation several times, because he's now the Vice Provost for Academic Affairs, and a lot of our students, you know, when I think about they have an assignment, and they turn in an assignment, and in their head they're thinking, what do I need to do? I got this assignment, I got to turn this damn thing in, you know? But the reason the assignment was created wasn't to produce the thing that you turn in. It's to change what goes on in your head as a result of producing the thing you turn in. You know, when somebody gets a PhD, the dissertation is just the leftovers from the experience, right? The document, the thing, that's good, right? But if doing the thing hasn't changed you fundamentally in the way you think, well then, so what, right? And everybody who I know is happy in their work. I don't mean happy like with a silly grin on their face all day long, but I mean feeling satisfied in their work. Feel satisfied because, and I'm going to loop back to my well-being definition again, because more often than not, on most days, their efforts lead to rewarding outcomes. Not rewarding meaning somebody else has rewarded me, but I've felt personally that I've accomplished something meaningful. I've helped somebody live a better life. I've helped somebody recognize some parts of their life experience that will be helpful to them in making progress toward whatever their goals are. And that's what sustains me. It's not the promise of whatever the incentive the institution has stuck out there, say, you know, you should really be going after that, whatever that happens to be.
So as radio people, one of the things we know is that we're on a strict schedule. So we were told that there had to be some announcements and messages and things like that at 10 of, which means we've hit that time. So I just want to thank you all for two things. First, for all the work you do, which is incredibly important and often appreciated by people who look at what our military does. But second, I want to thank you for just hanging out with us for an hour this morning and really giving us your time, which is the most valuable thing anyone can give to anyone.
Yeah,
so,
this has been a privilege. Thank you so much. All right, enjoy the rest of the day.
Both so much. That was very inspiring. I took really time to think about how I deal with my life and my daily rewards and refueling, and I love the idea of small doses of resiliency to keep us going for that marathon. It really makes a lot of sense, so thank you so much. I hope you all enjoyed it as well.